everybody, I'm Amy, this is my wife Maggie, and together we are ThinkerThemer, and we are back with another video. Sorry, it's been a little bit of a break, but you know what we've been doing? We've been playing a lot of card games, like a lot.
They're easy, they're convenient. A lot of them are fun. Some of them are like, okay, I guess never again. But it doesn't take a long time to get invested, like to learn them, I guess.
Yeah, and we got a ton of them at Tokyo Game Market when we went at the end of last year. So we've been playing lots of card games, and we want to tell you about 3 that we absolutely love, because the best thing about card games is when you find one that is excellent and brings people in and engages them really quickly, it's so easy to carry them around in your backpack. And I often have card games on me at all times.
This is true.
In fact, we went to record this video and then I realized that I had taken one of the games to work and I'd left it there. So I'm always like taking card games around. And so these 3 have really been hitting our table. We wanted to tell you about it. Some of them are maybe a little bit harder to find, but you know, that's why we're here. We all want to find those gems.
Yeah. And sometimes if there's, you know, enough demand for them, it means that they get picked up for distribution, and then everybody wins. So there's more of it to go around.
Yeah. Let us tell you about them. There are 3 games and they all suit kind of different occasions. So we want to talk to you about that. The first one, and this was really unexpected. So this is a game called Banana Boy versus Uni-cone. It doesn't really roll off the tongue, the name, but it does make sense when you learn what the game is all about, because this is a reimagined game of memory. Now, I can't imagine any gamers are out there going,
don't tune out, don't.
Yeah, like gamers hate memory aspects in games, and 2, memory is such an old game that you play with a deck of cards, and you know, when you turn it over and you make a pair, it's kind of, you know, it was one of the founding games, but now not so much. But this has just enough of a twist on it to make it so fun and compelling. It's a game where on both sides of the cards you have images, and they kind of come together to make a particular item. For example, it might be a hot dog, or it might be a sock, and you are trying to, an egg, and you are trying to match the 2 cards together. Simple enough. What you do is you spread all the cards out on the table, and then when it's your turn, you're going to be turning over 2 of those cards. But they have images on both sides of the cards. When you turn it over, you vocalize the images that you're seeing on the top, so that everybody around the room supposedly can remember.
That's right. Okay, so that's a this and that's a that. Okay.
Yeah, so you might be egg and hot dog, and you say those out loud, and then you flip them over. And then you're revealing 2 other items that they're all kind of muddled up across the cards.
Completely unrelated.
Yeah, but there is a suit and there's an image. Now, if you match the suit when you turn them over, you get to keep one of the cards. If you match the image, you get to keep both of the cards. And ideally, by the end of the game, you're trying to collect as many cards as you can to win. But there's a few little things that disrupt this thought process. Firstly, having images on both sides is just enough of a twist that makes it almost impossible. And this is where the hilarity comes in. So if you remember the game, you know, Trio or Nana, that game had a memory element that, you know, gamers were just like, how can I not remember this?
So difficult. This is a very basic executive function that I should be able to do.
Exactly. And this one has that same vibe. So when you're playing it, a lot of the time, it's just like, you literally just flip those over and I cannot remember what is underneath them. And the second fun element to this is if at any point you think you know where something is and you want to reserve the card, you can put your finger on it. So you can put one finger on one card when you're off turn and reserve that card for when it comes back around to you. Now, the funny thing about this is if anybody else understands or recognizes the pair you're trying to make, they can flip your paired card face up just to mess with you, because once it's face up, now you've got to flip the card that your finger is on, but the pair is already face up, and on your turn you have to flip 2 cards. So you can no longer get that pair. So it's funny and chaotic.
It's so simple and yet so effective at what it aims to do, and it just works out so well. And again, it's that thing of like, it's just so funny because you're just so amused at how is my memory so immediately bad? Because there's a lot of things distracting.
It is hilarious. If we go to any conventions this year, I'll be bringing this along with me. It's by Charles Ward, who's the designer of Sky Tower as well, that we featured on the channel. he was telling us about this game, and I was like, oh, I don't know if that sounds like
Sounds
our
a bit
kind of
light
game.
and simple.
Yeah.
Like, it is light and simple, but hilariously good. Yeah.
It is really catchy. Everyone I've played this with really loves it. It's just a great way to start, you know, the gaming session off, or a quick game in between other things that you're doing, a lunch break game. So if you have like those moments where it's a mixed group of people, gamers and non-gamers alike, this will bring everybody together.
And so portable as well. Like, this will fit in a pocket. Like, that is just so
it's
easy
tiny.
Carry
anyway,
around.
so that is Banana Boy versus Uni-cone.
The next game we have here is actually a solo narrative game. Now, as you may know if you watch the channel, I'm usually the solo player. And interestingly, this was actually on my most anticipated list for Gen Con last year, which is when it was released. And that's when I got it, but it took me a while to get around to playing it. It actually made it into this list, not from when I played it, but when Amy was like, oh, maybe I'll check it out. And Amy actually quite connected with it.
Well, it was kind of like that. It was more that you were showing me. You're like, come on. You know, you wanted me to go like, fine. But only if I have an audience.
Yeah, yes. So, but I'll tell you a little bit about the game. So Washed Ashore, which is a FateFlip game. So FateFlip is kind of like the main mechanic of it. Is it's a narrative solo game where you are going to be going, it's kind of like a choose your own adventure. This particular story of Washed Ashore starts with you being washed ashore on an island. And so it's very much like a survival type, you know, what can I tie together? What, you know, how am I going to, you've got these different trackers of energy, food, and safety. And so every card, you're going to be making a decision of, you know, this choice versus this choice versus this choice. They will all have particular costs. And that cost will be in terms of, well, this is going to cost you energy or this is going to cost you food. And obviously you don't want to get those tracks depleted because sometimes it'll either trigger end of game or something else might happen. But the interesting thing about this is as you're making those choices, it'll determine which direction that card will be flipped. So sometimes it'll be flipped on the horizontal side or the vertical side, and then it goes back to and either you then read it then and there, or it goes back to the back of the deck as you made this choice, and then it's the consequences that play out when you kind of come back to it.
Doom.
Yeah. But the other thing about it is like you've got different items that you could collect or potentially make along the way. But the reason why Amy ended up resonating with this is because the actual writing of it. So the narrative component, which is not super long, it's just the right amount.
It is just the right amount. So I feel if you're a thinker or a themer, it's, you know, it's not too much that I'm like, oh, now I've got to like read this whole page of text. It's enough to, you know, string together the narrative in the game, and it has a really nice story arc, and I thought that was really carefully and thoughtfully designed because no matter the combination of cards, I really felt like I was on this adventure and these were the things that were playing out, and therefore this is kind of the end to my story. I really felt that even with a small amount of text, but the writing itself is very well written.
Yeah. So it's good. It's engaging. It's sometimes like when you have bad writing in games, it just kind of takes you out of it, and it just. But then the other thing that I enjoyed about it is it's not a once and done sort of thing. It's you have multiple. Obviously, it's a choose your own adventure. Multiple avenues, multiple consequences depending on the avenues that you choose. But there's also multiple endings, and there's different chapters. So you can level up to if you manage to pass, you know, chapter 1, you can go on to, you know, some of the other chapters. The first few times that I played, I was like, this is too hard. I just keep losing and losing and losing. And so then I sort of tried to get a little bit better or try different things. And that was one of the things that was sort of interfering with my enjoyment of it. And then I brought Amy along and I was like, do you want to have a play of this? Do you want to have a look? And Amy was just so good at it. And so it was easy to be the witness for her so she would have an audience, but also the competitive thing of like, you're doing so much better at this than I was. And she was like, yeah.
That's what got me through. That's what got me through the spotlight and also being able to compete against your best. You're like, I never got this far.
Yeah, like I've never seen that part of the story.
This is my first go at
But it was also interesting because so we were kind of like co-oping. Really, Amy was making all the decisions and I was just facilitating the trackers and finding the items of the right card. But the interesting thing about this is like she would make choices that I didn't make, obviously, and I knew a part of the story that now she wouldn't get to see because I'd experienced. So that just means that it kind of has that replayability from that part.
It does, but I would caveat that with this is more like an escape room box kind of experience where once you've played it out, and yes, there's a lot of different stories storylines to follow. It's very challenging to get to the next level. You have to be probably a little bit less risk adverse than Maggie is, because Maggie always takes the safe option, and I'm like pushing those trackers as hard as I can, right on the edge all of the time, which is probably what got me through the story a bit more. But once you've explored it, I think once you've played through a lot of those different storylines, this will be one of those games that you want to gift to somebody else.
Yeah, or sell, or like it's
exactly.
There's nothing that's been destroyed and anything like that. So it's, and it's not an expensive game. So it packs quite a good gaming punch for the size, and it is something that you could take on a plane or somewhere that play by yourself. If
this FateFlip is the first in the series of FateFlip style games, and the designer, I believe, is making another one this year. It's Johannes Krenner, who is the designer of Challenges, which we haven't really played a lot. But he is also the designer of the upcoming new version of
Great Western Trail. El Paso.
So you'll be hearing a bit more about him, but I think this is really clever. So and even as a non-solo gamer, I think it was really fun to play in this cooperative style as well, where I was actually reading out all of the text with Maggie, and it was like a fun time. So I really surprised and delighted me this game.
There you go. So that is Washed Ashore.
Okay, so we've talked about the party game that everyone's going to like, the solo experience, which, is kind of interesting and well written. The third one is for the gamers out there. This is a much more layered strategic experience that also brings in some tactics. It is a new trick-taking game called Torchlit. Now, this game, the premise of this game is that you are all moving through a dungeon and
fighting monsters. All the suits are different monsters.
And so the theme alone, I was like, I'm not sure about the theme, but it plays out in a really cute and compelling way. Bear with me as I talk about how it plays, because the mechanics at first are quite a bit to get your head around. But once you're up and going, once you've finished that first game, this is a trick-taking game that I think has so many layers and is just so compelling on every turn. I'll tell you why. So everybody has a meeple to begin with that is moving through a dungeon. Now, you've got this dungeon that has doors labeled 0 to 6 or 0 to 7, depending on the player count. And the way you move through the dungeon or across from door to door is by winning tricks, or by playing the same numbered card as the person who won the trick. So there's two different ways you can move forward, and when you move forward, you're going to step to the next door. Now, at the beginning of every round, you are trying to predict where your meeple will end up. i.e. you're trying to guess how many times you're going to step forward, and also how many times you can maybe lose so that you don't have to move forward. And the really interesting thing about this game is the way that a trick plays out. So the person who lost the previous trick or played the lowest card is going to be the one who leads the next trick.
Dungeon Warden.
The Dungeon Warden. And so that makes it really interesting, because at times you're going to lose, potentially because you don't want to move forward in the dungeon, but now you need to lead, which gives you more chance of winning. Now, you have to follow suit. There is a trump suit. The trump suit is different in that if you lead with a trump suit, people don't have to follow with the trump suit. And then there's all of the rules at first are like, oh, that's just another little rule that I need to remember. But once you start playing, you realize why all these rules are important. And one of the most interesting parts about this game is at the start of the round, you're placing a card out of your hand, which is the number of one of the doors that you think you're going to end up at.
Of which number door you're going to end up at.
So I might say I'm going to end up at door 5 and put that card aside. Now I'm going to play out the rest of the round, and when I get down to one card, I'm going to pick that card back up. And now I have 2 cards to choose from to lock in my bid at the end. But in the last trick, nobody needs to play on suit, which is very, very clever, because firstly, it means that you're not locked into having to play a card that you wanted to be your final bid. So it makes total sense from that perspective. But also, it means that you can really mess with other people. And I didn't realize that until we'd played a few games. And that final card that you play, if you win with that card and someone else has played the same number, they're going to have to move forward as well. And by the end of the game, you can kind of predict where people want to land. And why is that? Because every time a trick is completed, the person who's the dungeon warden is going to allocate cards to each of the dungeons. And at the end of the game, those cards are going to be tallied up and that will be your score. You get more bonus points if you correctly predicted where you were going to land. And if there's any trump cards that are in your dungeon, they're worth twice as much as a regular card. So the whole time you are collectively building this dungeon up. And then you're trying to work out where everybody is trying to land. And you're trying to mess with people. Now,
I'm usually just trying to work out where I'm going to land. I'm not worried about anyone else, unless you're like very clearly, like especially towards the end where you're like, oh, it would be very, because you can see all the cards that are in each dungeons. Like it would be very advantageous for Amy to finish that in that spot.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll help move her along to like another, The other thing is with that bid card, so the card that you end up locking in, if you miss your bid, that card is also going to be added to the corresponding dungeon. So it's again potentially going to give someone else even more points because that's a double point kind of type card.
And so the feeling of this game is like at first really confusing because you can win with a low card as long as it matches the card that wins the trick. So you're constantly thinking about like, what do I want to play and do I want to step forward at this point? And I should say that the dungeon laps around. So if you're winning a lot of tricks, you can go all the way back around to, 0, 1 or 2. So you're thinking about that, which makes it equal parts strategy and tactics because you're waiting to see what other people are playing. And that's true of most trick-taking games. But in this game in particular, at the very beginning, you feel like you have so many options because you've got quite a lot of cards in your hand. You have quite a big hand of cards in this game. And you're trying to work out what you're going to play. And you need to give yourself as many options. And you don't really want to lead because that, doesn't give you as many options of whether you want to follow or not by, playing a matching card. So there's just so much to think about. By the time you get to the end of your hand, now you're thinking about that bid and where you're going to land, and the crescendo of the end of a round is just, it's so palpable. Everybody starts getting really stressed about where they are. And so many times when we're playing this game, people were vocalizing just like, no, I've messed everything up. I've ruined this.
To give up on all my hopes and dreams. It's never going to happen for me.
And so what you get from this game that you don't normally get in a trick-taking game is a very visual representation of how close you are to your hopes and dreams. And I really, really love this game.
Even just like those touches, like when you're, you play the lowest card, then you actually get control over, the cards that will go into the dungeon. So again, like I might be really aiming for that 4 or 5 because that's where I think I'm going to end up. So if I'm seeing 4s and 5s, and even the rules around what cards get to go in is usually one of every color. But if all the cards are different colors, then the dungeon warden gets to decide if any of them go in or how many of them. So there's just enough variability. On that, I'll say the one thing that I did wish for, particularly at the start, was when we were learning it, was some kind of player aid to very quickly remind of those rules. Obviously, once you get going, like all of that, it's like, oh, okay, like you kind of understand it and it's not an issue.
It's one of those games where you're like, there's so many rules, and then you're like, let's just play around. And then once you start playing it, you're like, okay, now it makes sense why those rules are there. This is actually, I believe, a very small print run at the moment. We'll link below about, where we think you can get this, but hopefully it will get reprinted or picked up by a bigger publisher because it's very clever.
Yes.
And we play a lot of trick-taking games, but this one really grabbed us. I think people who are really into, harder, heavier games will find this that scratches the itch of like, oh, this is making my brain work at every step.
Yes.
Every literal step through the dungeon.
Nice. But which is the other thing. It's like, it's not really, like it's really satisfying for that kind of medium, like for that kind of gamery brain. It's probably not something that I would bring out for non-gamers or someone who's just very like, there's just going to be too many layers and they're just going to get lost in the dungeon, I guess.
Yeah, if you like, kind of simpler trick-taking games that maybe just have one rule twist, then this is probably a little bit of too much of a step up if you're, because we do bring trick-taking games to family events and things, but only if they're very, very simple rule sets. I would never try and do that with this. This is the one that I'm bringing to a convention or something where we're playing lots of heavy games and we want something that's like a little bit easier to get into, but is still, giving you that satisfying experience.
And even the length of play was just the right amount. Which is like, it's satisfying and you feel like, I've played a game, but it doesn't overstay. Obviously, it's welcome.
So that we've got 3 new card games here. And, as we said, we play a lot of them. And, do you like card game content? Because we'd love to hear from you in the comments, because we want to try and do more of it, because they're just, the price point is right. They bring a lot of joy to the table. And it's really nice, as I mentioned, to always have something new and interesting to carry on you as a gamer. I really like that because I love teaching games as well. So, so there's these 3. We always rank them at the end. This is not a total card game ranking, but if I had to rank these, for me, of course, it would probably be, the multiplayer games first. So I'd probably go Torchlit and then Banana Boy versus Uni-cone, just because of the insane amount of fun I've had playing this. And then Ashore, which is, not for nothing, because it's a solo game and I actually really enjoyed it myself.
My ranking would actually be the same. I really, really enjoyed how invested and engaged I felt with Torchlit. This, even though people know I don't like fun in games, this is so quick that I can just just play around or like play one game of it and it's done. And then usually people are like, again, and I'm like, okay, I'll see you later. I'll go off and play this now for a bit. But still, I appreciate that the simplicity and the laughter and the joy that it just brings immediately to the table. And then my third one would be Ashore. Even though this should have been my first in terms of I love a solo narrative, and it is quite good. But I think the one of them was the difficulty level kind of tripped me up a little bit. And then, as Amy said, it's once you kind of go through some of the key storylines, it's okay, this is something that now I can either sell or move on to someone else.
Yeah, and I think from a rating perspective, this for me is kind of, I would say somewhere in the low 8s, and this is the high 7s, and this is around a mid 7-ish. So, 7.5, 7.9, and 8.2 or something. That's just I didn't think about that before.
I'm like, you're putting me on the spot.
Sorry.
Should I rate them now? Should I rate them? So I would probably give this maybe I would say a 7.2 to that one. 7. It's a party game.
So
it's a
fun.
Party game. 7.8.
Oh, that's high for you.
That is high for me, particularly for a party game.
Because it's over quickly.
For me, because I just have to play one game and then I'm out. But that one game I really, really enjoyed. This is actually, I'm going to give it an 8.2.
Yeah, that's what I gave it as well. Yeah, and so we'll link below where you can find these games. I'm so sorry if they're sold out or you can't get them, but I'm sure and hope that all of these continue to be printed, because they are great games, and we're still looking for those gems of games to bring you in 2025. If you enjoyed this video, please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and we'll be back with more board game content soon. But otherwise, bye for now.
Bye.